Man, bullshit talks. Well, how's
Man.
it go? How's it go? Bullshit talks, money walk, there are money walks, whatever. However, Brandon and Aiyuk want to say it, cryptic messages, reading into it. All I know is money talks and bullshit walks. John Lynch over here speaking however he wants, does not matter because the 49ers are planning on making moves. Obviously, they're having a meeting today with the NFL owners meeting. John Lynch spoke today. The NFL decided to ban a hip drop tackle. What are your thoughts as the offensive player on that ban of a hip drop tackle?
Man, as an offensive player, you would think I would side with the rule, but I just don't. I don't see how any offensive player could side with that rule. Like that's putting so much pressure on the defense to try to tackle the right way. Am I tackling them right? And if they don't think about it and they do the hip drop tackle, unconsciously thinking, and they get a penalty, so it's like a lose-lose situation for the defense. I hate the rule. I don't like it at all. It sucks. It's unfortunate that players have been getting injured from it. But none of it I seen that was on purpose. No ill intents, man. I don't agree with that hip drop tackle ban. I don't agree at all. Don't like it.
What's crazy is, have you ever heard of the hip drop tackle like being coached at any of the levels you've ever played at or coached at?
No, I've never heard of it up until like maybe
A few
this
years ago.
year.
Yeah, a few
This
years
year,
ago. Like,
yeah.
and that was
It's
because of the Warren or the Greenlaw hit where he broke Tony Pollard's leg, where people were like, "Oh, that's a hip drop tackle. We got to get rid of that in the NFL." I'm like, this is the first time I've ever heard of that. Shout out to Ashley
yeah.
Ariana. What
Ashley.
up? What up? Make sure you guys subscribe to her channel. I have a show with her on Friday, so make sure you guys go do that. Do me a favor and hit that subscribe button on her channel. But yeah, like I've never heard of this hip drop tackle. And then out of nowhere, they're like, "Hey, let's decide to ban hip drop tackles." It's like, wait, just say you want offenses to score 40 plus points a game, and you want the defenses to not disguise any looks, not play football, and just let the offense score. Because essentially, that's what they're doing. Like they're telling defense, "Hey, don't tackle, and if you're gonna come up and tackle, make sure you try to ankle tackle." Like I don't see how that's gonna be possible. You're gonna see dudes being dragged. Emiliano says the hip drop was a dance craze in 1989, taking it back old school. So Lynch had a press conference today at media day well, not necessarily media day, but NFL owners meetings. And pretty much Lynch was very vocal today, and he kind of said a lot more than he probably normally would. But John Lynch essentially said he sees Darrell Luter, Ambry Thomas, and Isaac Yiadom to compete outside at corner. So essentially, kind of what I'm looking into it is kind of what we had talked about in the past, like kind of seeing the nominal Lenore inside. I personally think he's the defensive connector at that nickel role. I know he doesn't want to play inside. What are your thoughts on the Niners defense moving forward, having a bunch of guys compete on that outside for that one spot? And then he's like, their pecking order will go based off how we see them. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think the Niners are going at corner in the right direction?
I mean, I definitely think that they still need to address that position, but it's a start. I like that they brought in some competition with the corner Isaac. Is that his name?
Isaac Yiadom?
Yeah, he had a breakout year last year. I like that they're thinking about bringing in players to come in and compete, but I don't think that's enough, especially with Demo not wanting to. Well, I don't think he wants to play nickel as well. All the outside corners get paid, although the nickels are starting to get paid as well. But if Demo's smart, he wants to get paid and he wants to play outside, and he showed this year that he's a really good outside corner, and he got better throughout the whole year. So yeah, the Niners still need to address that position. They need to bring in Nichols. And they need to bring in some more another corner outside that can come in and compete with those guys that John Lynch mentioned. I definitely don't think they're done. I don't think they're going to go into the year, just with those core group. They're going to add some rookies for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at that group, right, the three guys competing outside, it just, to me, essentially what you could do, I mean, on base situations, and you're not in sub packages, So if you're not in nickel, you're not in dime look, so you could have Demo play outside, have the other guys on the bench, kind of how they were doing it for a little while, bringing Ambry in
Mhm.
to play when they're in nickel and moving Demo inside. So essentially, they could do that. I mean, I don't see why they would. I mean, the nominal Lenore should be kind of upset,
Yeah.
uh, but the Niners could essentially just do what they did to Jimmy Ward. Hey, you either shut up or you sit the bench. And I
Yeah.
thought that was crazy because they told Jimmy Ward, because Jimmy wanted to play safety because obviously safety gets paid more than nickel, and they were like, nah, you either play nickel or you're right on the bench. And I thought, to me, that was an interesting way to put it, because if you're doing that to a legit starter, you got no issue doing it to the nominal Lenore,
Mhm.
who had a breakout year in my opinion. I think the Niners should be pushing to pay him right now, like in his third year. I just finished his third year, going into his fourth year of his deal. Right now is the perfect opportunity to get him cheaper than
Mhm.
what he is going to be next year. So very curious on how they're looking at that moving forward. Kittle and Charvarius Ward, for those who weren't aware, um, they had muscle surgery on their core muscle, and then Dre Greenlaw is looking to return by week 1. But John Lynch said essentially, we're not going to push it. We might do a PUP situation, so he may be out for the first 4 weeks, depending on
Mhm.
how the Niners approach it, giving him a little more time. What are your thoughts on Kittle and Ward having to get core muscle surgery, and Greenlaw aiming to come back week 1?
Oh man, I don't know the rate on, what's the percentage of players that come back from a core muscle surgery and perform like themselves. I personally had a core groin lower extremity injury, which was the groin. So they kind of pair those, the core injuries and the groin injuries, the same. They kind of repair it the same as well. So I
Okay.
know what it's like. I know what it's like when, when you have that surgery, you don't really come back yourself. And Kittle
And
is
what do you mean
older.
by that?
You just don't feel the same. It takes a while to get back, and that's just me speaking from personal experience. It may not be the same for Kittle, or Greenlaw. Greenlaw got the same surgery as well, or
No, no. So it was Charvarius
was it
Ward. So two guys who
Ward.
use their core a lot.
Yeah, Ward and Kittle. Kittle's up there in age. Hopefully they do heal better, or the surgery goes better. I did go to a specialist in Philadelphia, Dr. Myers. So I mean, if they went to the same doctor, speaking from experience, I did not come back the same type of player. And you just feel that injury, and you just you don't feel yourself, and it takes some time getting used to. So hopefully that's not the case. But I would definitely keep an eye on those type of injuries, and take it serious.
And when you did come back, obviously you're saying like you didn't come back yourself.
Hmm.
Are you talking in terms of cutting, speed, strength? Are you talking about just in general, like everything in general? Or is it something specific, like we're like, hey, I wasn't able to do this at all back until what I was before that injury?
I would say like your burst and your speed, and especially at corner, you need your burst and your speed, your makeup speed. You're reacting quickly when a receiver breaks down and he runs a comeback route. You're breaking down and having to explode out to stay with that receiver. So yeah, like I would say that's the main two things: your speed and your explosion. Now these is I got it in college, but these are highly active professional athletes, and they're getting the top of the line, treatment and things like that. So hopefully they come back better. But me personally, I know I didn't come back the same player. So you definitely got to watch out for those injuries.
In when your college days, you were a baller, so you
Mhm.
definitely were one of those dudes at the top of the level. So
Yeah.
definitely not, you're over here trying to make it sound like you weren't nothing good. You're over here trying to talk down on yourself, like, I wasn't a top dude, but I'm just top three at Fresno State for no reason. You know what I'm saying? Like, come on now, miss me with that bullshit.
Look,
You
look, look,
know what
hey,
I'm
I'm not
saying?
going through my own horror.
You know what I'm saying? You're over here talking like you're just a casual receiver who
I'm just a
barely was.
guy, man.
You just walk on, man, killing me. No, but like it is something that's concerning because
Mhm.
obviously Charvarius Ward, that injury could obviously affect him moving to the season. George Kittle aging, you don't know how that body responds. He's never gotten his labrum fully surgery done. He never wanted to
Mhm.
do it. I don't know
Mhm.
why. Waited. Still, like that's to me is like, hey, your body's gonna keep breaking down. if you don't take care of it. Glad he got the surgery. That's something that they need to do. What I'm concerned about is how do their bodies respond? Because those aren't just backup level players. Those are your star players on offense and defense. And with Dre Greenlaw expecting to come back week 1, the Niners they're not expecting it. They're like, hey, do your thing. Our plan is to put you on the PUP. You're out 4 weeks. Don't try to rush anything. You don't want to rush an Achilles injury. But I thought that was interesting that John Lynch came out and said, like, our plan is to eventually just put him on PUP, like the first 4 weeks, essentially, give him another 4 weeks of a recovery, and then throw him into the fire. And then you mentioned something about the rookies. 2 rookies they drafted. People were expecting Cameron Latu and Braden Willis. When you take someone in the 3rd round, you're expecting them to produce for you. Latu didn't produce nothing. Was actually placed on the injured reserve before the season ended his season. Essentially was a redshirt year because he was not good in camp. He was not good at all. Like, it was kind of a bust pick during camp. And then Braden Willis played special teams primarily. They're both expected to compete with Jake Tonjes, who the Niners just signed in free agency from the Bears. He was on the Niners as well on their practice squad. Doesn't have any stats recorded or anything like that. So expecting to compete with the player that hasn't done much, and you were drafted in the 3rd round. What does that tell you? Because I know roster politics play a factor into a lot of this stuff when it comes to the NFL. What does this mean about Cameron Latu?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. The Niners don't really play the Niner politics, and we've seen that, multiple times. We see 5th rounders, become superstars and starters on this team. So I know Niners don't play politics, and I think that's one of the reasons why Latu was placed on injury reserve. We've seen what he was doing, in these games. We read about what he was doing in camp and in these practices. He wasn't doing anything, and he was a 3rd round draft pick. I think that the Niners are thinking like, okay, we may have to have another backup plan for the backup tight end position, because Latu, the one who we expected to be, the procedure to Kittle when Kittle is done, he didn't show us anything. He didn't give us anything to look forward to. And then we had Braden Willis, who's that specialty type player, who can, come in and change the personnel, but they're still in the passing and, putting him against a linebacker. He's supposed to be that type of player, and he didn't get no run in the season. And the Niners don't have a player like him, to besides, I'm saying, behind Kittle, they don't have a player like Willis at tight end. So it's like, okay, so I think their antennas is up, and they're looking in the draft. I can tell you that they're for sure looking in the draft. They may bring another rookie in sooner than expected to come in and compete with Willis and Latu, just because of how they were treated last year, and they didn't really give the Niners nothing forward to look to. Like, so I think they're looking in the draft to if somebody drops to them and they feel comfortable taking a tight end that they really really like, they're gonna take them.
And what's crazy is like when you take someone in the 3rd round, you're hoping they could compete right away. Like they're at least they could give you production right away. Cameron Latu essentially didn't give them no production on the IR. Essentially, he could be one of those other 3rd round cuts that the Niners have this offseason, because you're not going to keep him on the roster if he ain't going to give no production. And that's something the Niners have done with running backs in the past that they've drafted in the 3rd round. So they don't care where you're drafted. For me, it's just very interesting. They signed a dude off the practice squad. Essentially, he was a practice squad guy all last year, and he's expected to compete with 2 guys that they were high on. Like, you don't, and this is something that, in my opinion, has actually affected the Niners in the past. If you look at the drafts that they've had outside of Brock Purdy and a couple of the other guys, they have not drafted well. They reach high on players that they fall in love with. They have not drafted well in the 3rd rounds. And they're in this predicament on having to aim for the lower level free agents because they can't draft well, and they're not re-upping those guys that they've drafted. Instead, they're letting them go, and they're picking up dudes off practice squads. And to me, that's a concern. Is Latu another 3rd round bust for the 49ers? Because when you have guys like Nick Bosa you're having to pay, a quarterback that you have to eventually pay, you have to develop through the draft, and it doesn't look like they're doing so right now.
Yeah, I mean, and Latu, like watching Latu, he didn't even show me anything at Alabama. So I was really shocked
Mm-mm.
about that. And, just off of film, before we read anything on, training camp or, OTAs, I thought Willis would have been a better player than Latu off the
Agreed.
bat. Just off the bat, just watching the film out of them two. So I didn't really see it with Latu. I don't know what the Niners saw. He's not like a tough guy either. He's a big dude, but he's not a tough guy. So I don't know what they saw. I think they might, be cutting ties earlier than we think. So
And
be on the lookout for tight ends.
it could be also too, because I know the Niners do hold a lot of weight in terms of John Lynch mentioned in the past that he whatever Nick Saban says, he holds it to a higher regard.
Mm,
So if Nick Saban was promoting Latu, and because he said that in the past, like, oh yeah, if Nick, for example, Reuben Foster,
mm,
he was like Nick Saban was preaching how good of a player he is and how good of a person he is. He goes, we overlooked the red flags we saw at the combine when he got into it with the medical personnel
mm,
because Nick Saban said, I've never seen that here.
mm,
I don't know how he is outside of here though. So it could have been that situation where Nick Saban was hyping up his guys like he
mm,
should, which is the college head coaches do. So I don't know if that's the case, but very interesting. The Niners are in the market for a tight end 2, potentially a tight end 3 as well if they could find them. And then John Lynch, he went on and he talked about every player that they signed and why they signed them, what the purpose of that player is moving forward. He talked about how Leonard Floyd is just an excellent football player who they've admired for a really long time, and um, they loved competing against him, and how he competes at a very high level, opposite of Bosa. They're expecting him to have a great year. He talked about Devondre Campbell, the linebacker, and he said it was a blessing that they were able to get him after Edric Kendricks backed out of his deal, and said he's a guy that they really always respected and liked. They like him in pass coverage, and he thinks he's an excellent player, which is weird because the Niners always
mm,
picked on him every time they played him. So that doesn't make sense. How do you respect the player if you're picking on that player every
mm,
time you play him? And then he talked about Isaac Yiadom, the cornerback they recently signed, and said they can't have a can't have enough good corners. And he had a great year. They said and then he was asked what clicked.
mm,
And then he pretty much answered that because he has a very good productive special team player, is essentially just putting him on defense consistently as he did last year and having him get reps, and it's to stop doubting himself. And that was what he took off. And then he mentioned what we spoke about earlier, that he's going to be competing with a couple of the guys to start. But what I really took from that, because he spoke a little bit about Malik Collins, but it was more like how good he is. And Malik Collins is probably the best player they picked up.
mm,
But he mentions Yetur Gross Matos, and he's talking about how when he spoke to his agent, when they spoke to Yetur Gross Matos, they mentioned that why they were so interested in him on him was because they loved his ability to play inside and outside, and they wanted to play him in the kind of role that they used Arden Key and Charles Omenihu.
mm.
In my opinion, I thought those two guys were two of the better underrated 49ers defensive linemen over the past few years because of their ability to play inside and outside.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on John Lynch mentioning Yetur Gross Matos to be used like Charles Omenihu does? Because for me, it does make more sense. We did talk about this when he was signed,
Mm.
but what are your thoughts? Because they're telling us exactly how they plan on using him.
I mean, yeah, it's easy for them to say the two most productive players who they signed for a minimum. Who his shape is kind of molded after. It's easy for them to say that, right? Like this is who
Mhm.
we want him to come in and be. But it's easier said than done, right? I don't know much about this guy. He has a lot of length. He's a big dude who can play. He can play inside and outside. But is he going to be those players? I don't know. But it's good that, John Lynch came out and said, this is how we want to use him. This is who we're expecting him to be. So now we have a better idea of, how the Niners plan on using him. When we first signed him, I personally thought it would be like earlier years of Eric Armstead when Eric was on the edge.
Okay.
And he was beating up, he was playing the six technique, beating up the tight end, setting that edge. And then, on rushing downs, they'll move him inside. But it sounds like he's going to be a DN, but on passing downs, they're going to line him up everywhere like they did Arden Key and Omenihu. But No, I'm curious to see how he comes out and plays, because those are two dudes who, lived up to what we were hoping them to be. So I mean, I'm curious to see how he's gonna come out and play.
What was interesting is he also like during that conversation, he told his agent after the fact, he was like, "Hey, you actually priced him low. It was like you buying a house in Palo Alto, you priced it low,
Mm-hmm.
and we jumped on it right away. And after we signed him, a lot of people around the league called us and said, "You guys got our guy. Like we really wanted him at that price. So you guys got a good guy." I thought that was interesting. Is like you don't normally go out publicly and say, "Hey, I told the agent you effed up." Like, hey, you gotta go get a new agent. Like telling you right now, go get a new agent,
Mhm.
because if your agent just lost you out on a lot of money, if he's pricing you low and you had a bunch of teams there and you still took probably one of the lower end contracts, could
Right.
have got more money. Just saying. I thought that was interesting. It's like, oh
Yeah.
wow, if a lot of teams are in on him, the Niners got him on a bargain deal. That's great for the 49ers in the
Mhm.
long run.
Yeah, and it's like you come out and say the agent could get fired ASAP.
He's right. So I'm saying, like, I would have fired. Hey, I would have called him up. Like, did you just see what John said today? Well,
I
you saw
bet.
that? Well, guess what? All right, well, cool. You're no longer my agent, bro. Like,
Yeah, right.
like
That's
what
messed
the?
up.
I thought that was crazy. Like, that's a bold way to like. Normally, you don't see a general manager say something like that. Like,
Yeah.
that's to me was like, hey, John, are you thinking about going back to the media, my guy? Because you talking a whole lot like you're media, like you're part of the media. So for
Right.
me, I definitely thought that was interesting. John Lynch also talked about how why they were bringing in safeties and stuff like that, and he talked a little bit about how they just think the safety class, free agent class, is a lot of guys that they like, and it's not really overpriced right now, and they wanted to take a look at some of the safeties,
Mhm.
and he starts talking about Hufanga, um, and so essentially he gets asked about Hufanga's progress and noting that the offseason roster additions could still occur. But essentially, he says Talanoa is doing well. That's the great news. He said he's rehabbing extremely well, beating the timeline. Everybody does, but
Mhm.
Talanoa is a worker and he's doing great. And then he mentions, he's like, and then he threw this out there. I don't know if this was asked based off of the transcript I'm reading. It says, we're incredibly high on Jair and his prospects for becoming a player at that position that we can really trust and a playmaker as well. So those guys we feel good about. He goes, now, do you continue to add? He goes, we have George Odom. Gibson is a guy that we've always kept in touch with, but and we'll continue to. He goes, and he kind of mentioned how he's a free agent. May retire. He's like, we're planning on wrapping up free agency, but there's maybe one or two more moves.
Mhm.
You will see.
Mhm.
He goes, but we brought in some guys there at safety. He goes, the safety market is kind of took a beating. I feel bad for those guys. It took years to get back to that progress. And then he's mentioning and saying, he's like, whether we make an ad or just go with what we have right now, we feel good about the position. Talking about the safety position. So he brought in a safety in Julian Blackman, talked really highly of Jair Brown, but when he was being asked about Talanoa Hufanga, he just like, well, his rehab's going great. He's beating it. Well, everyone beats their rehab process,
Uh,
but he's a hard worker. Kind
mm,
of sounded like he didn't really care to talk about Talanoa Hufanga,
mm.
but instead preferred to speak about Jair Brown and the other free agents and how the market is low. What are your thoughts on the 49ers bringing in safeties?
Mm.
Do they think Hufanga is part of the core? Is he good enough to be part of the core? What are your thoughts on the Niners and John Lynch, a former safety, looking at safeties to replace him?
Man, so this is tough because I think Huff is a baller, man. Like he brought something to the Niners, as far as that safety position that I feel like they didn't have in a long time. Like he's a ball hawk. He's a turnover machine. He finds a way to get his hands on the ball, whether that's forcing a fumble, a strip, interception. He's a turnover machine, right? So I think he's a baller. Can he fit? I got to see what he looks like after, what he looks like coming off of injury. So I think this is the Niners, doing their homework, making sure that in case they don't feel comfortable with Huffy just yet, we're gonna bring this guy in and make sure we have somebody that can, complete our lineup still. We're not going to have a hole at safety like they did last year with Logan Ryan, and those other and it was somebody else, but they don't want to be in that situation anymore. So that's why, and I think they shouldn't wait. They should bring in. I like that dude that they brought in. Bring him in, sign him. If the market doesn't look like they're going to have to pay much anyway.
Nothing crazy,
right? So it's either that or they're waiting for the draft to see if they're whoever they have highlighted makes it down to them. If they don't, then let's go ahead and sign the safety that we brought in, and we'll complete it like that.
I mean, they could essentially replace Hufanga with a USC guy in Kalen Bullock, who is known to be a rangy free safety. Like he is the eraser. Like if you look back at the Seattle Seahawks defense back in the day with Richard Sherman, they had Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas. He could essentially be your Earl Thomas, but a bigger version of him. He's 6'3", rangy as heck. He's a ball hawk. He has tackling issues, but it's not as bad as people give him like crap for.
Yeah.
Really good safety. So they could essentially bring him in the third round, second round, if they're really looking for that ball hawk safety to play free safety. Because you and I have talked about it before. Hufanga and Jair, they're very similar style of play. You can't really essentially put one at free safety when they're not as comfortable, or you're expecting one of them to get beat every once in a while because they're out of position. So to me, it definitely looks like the Niners don't view Hufanga as part of the core. It looks like hey, if you're trying to replace someone who's an all-pro, why? Like, you believe that the injury is going to make him that much slower, that worse of a player? Like, I don't see how an ACL affects a player that much in today's age with all the new science and everything behind ACL recovery. So essentially, his knee might get faster based on all the rehabilitation and the knee process and how it works. So I don't think the Niners view him as part of the core.
That's tough. That's just tough because he's such a baller. We've seen him, man. Like, and I mean, if we're having to pick, like, pay Huff and or keep Jair on the bench, then I get it, right? I get it. If you like Jair that much, move on from Huff, draft a replacement, let Jair be that Huff type of player. But if you're picking like, oh, we love Jair, let's just move on from Huff. Like, I think Huff he's a better player. He'll be better. He'll even post injury, he'll still be a better player. So if anything, it has to do with money if they're trying to move on. That's my opinion.
I 100% agree. I think Hufanga became one of my favorite players. Just the way he plays, the energy he brings to your team. It's just a different kind of player than what the Niners have on the roster. He brings a nasty mentality, wanting to smack the shit out of you. Like, people fear going over the middle against him. So to me, I do see the Niners viewing him as replaceable. I think that's why, like, John Lynch is kind of like preparing the fans. Well, we really love Jair. Hey, let me go on a campaign for him. We really love Jair Brown, and don't be shocked if I sign another safety. And they won't really, if you look at it, they really won't go Julian Black. And a lot of people said, hey, Julian Blackman could also play in that nickel role. You could be that big nickel. I don't see that happening, because if he is in that nickel role, you still have Jair and Hufanga as your deep safety. You have them as your deep third. So essentially, if you're having Julian Blackman out there, it defeats the purpose of having a true nickel or a safety in that nickel spot where, for example, if you had an extra nickel and you wanted to actually disguise things, and you could have Jair Brown, who showed he's capable of playing man coverage in the slot. Hufanga on tight ends isn't bad. It's more so when Hufanga's matched up on shiftier, fast receivers where he gets beat. So I don't see the 3 safety role working with Jair and Hufanga.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
That'd be tough. You got 2. Yeah, it'd be tough. 2 of the same players.
One of those safeties is getting matched up. Out of the 3 safeties, is getting matched up on a good receiver or a tight end who is a mismatch for them. It's keeping it 100. Like, as much as I like them, it's a mismatch, and I don't think the Niners should put themselves in that predicament. I love Huff. It sucks that they don't view him as part of the core. At least I think they don't view him as part of the core. I could be completely wrong. But what's crazy is the main player that is part of the core, he got compliments today. He got complimented by a really highly regarded head coach in the NFL. And before we get to this next part, because we're going to go from this part and then to the main topic of the hour, if you guys have any questions for Jay Harp and myself, drop them in the chat. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. Make sure you guys are following Jay Harp II on Twitter. Make sure you guys go out and you guys buy yourself a water bottle in the description. You can find the water bottles. You could also find Jay Harp's sister's book, child book. Make sure you guys do both of those. Get your kid a water bottle. Get your kid a book. Hydrate Like a Pro. And the book is called, let me go ahead and find what I'm not 100% what it's called.
Let me see.
I have it right here in the description, so I'll pull it up right now. But make sure you guys go on the link. You guys hit Hydrate Like a Pro. That is Jay Harp's personal water bottles that he released. You want to go ahead and explain what they are and what they're for?
Man, so it's basically it's a kid's water bottle, to get kids excited about drinking water. I know my kids, they have a hard time hydrating. They want juice, right? So why not give them, my son loves football, and we're going to get other sports out there, baseball, basketball, soccer, gymnastics. We're going to get all these sports out there, but why not get them excited about putting water into a football water bottle and starting to learn to drink water and starting to learn that water is important, at this age as well. So it's really like a revolution. We're going to get these kids to start enjoying to drink water and hydrating at an early age. So when they get older, it's going to be simple.
Absolutely. And you could also, while you're there buying your kid or kid's water bottle, Hydrate Like a Pro, you could get a kid's book called Sports Dream by Jay Harp's sister, Kiava Martinez. I hope I said her name wrong. I hope I didn't butcher that.
No, you did. Perfectly. Perfect.
So make sure you guys get a book and a water bottle and drop a question if you guys have a question. Well, Andy Reid decided he got asked what his thoughts were on Brock Purdy, and he came out and he answered. I don't know how a coach is supposed to answer a question about another player. So I don't know. I'm very curious on how you're going to respond to this because I'll read the quote, and then he also gave we'll do the Brock Purdy part first, and then I'll read the Shanahan part where he also talked about Shanahan. But he essentially said, yes, I have a lot of respect for Brock. He does a nice job. I really don't care where he got drafted, right? It doesn't matter to me. And then he talked about he's just a good player. He sees the field. He's got good accuracy, great timing with his receivers, and he's calm. You feel like he's everything you feel like he has everything kind of under control. And then he talked about how and then he talked about Kyle Shanahan on how he could overcome obstacles. And but what are your thoughts on Andy Reid talking about Brock Purdy in that fashion?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he said all the things he was supposed to say, right? I mean, there's not much a coach will go and say that's like this player sucks, which Brock Purdy doesn't. He's not gonna trash a player. I haven't seen it.
I mean, imagine if he would have came out and said, imagine how the media spins it if he comes out and says, "Hey, tell Brock I said thank you for my second or third ring."
Right.
What is he
exactly? So no, he said everything he was supposed to say, which is right. Brock he has everything under control. He's cool, especially for damn near he's a second-year player. He's cool, calm, collected. He played well in the Super Bowl. This team is built for him not to have to go win it by himself, right? So he played well enough. For Andy Reid to come out and say that, I feel like that's great. I mean, there's only two ways. There's probably three ways you can explain a quarterback. Yeah, he's good. He just needs more playing time, and he'll develop. I can see the potential. That's one. Two, he does it like what he said about Brock Purdy. He does everything right. He sees the field. He has great timing. He's a cool, calm, collective. That's two. Three, he's great. He's gonna be a face. He's elite. He's gonna be the face of the NFL one of these days. He's just gonna keep progressing towards that. And that's the third one. So I mean, I like it. I agree with Andy. Like Purdy is cool, calm, collective. He's that dude, man. Like he gets it into the right players' hands. He's able to maneuver in the pocket, get out of there, make plays with his feet. I hope he does it more next year. But yeah, I agree everything with Andy said. Andy said in regards to Brock Purdy.
I thought it was cool because it sounded. I watched the video of it, and it sounded like he was being honest. Like he was being as honest as he could, and he was just speaking from the heart, as Andy Reid always does. And for me, what the favorite part was he's calm. Like it feels like he always has it under control, and I think that's one of the most important parts for a quarterback is because we do see quarterbacks, they start getting a little rattled, they start getting pressured, and they start feeling some kind of way. And that's something that you do notice every game from Brock. He doesn't get under duress. When he does get under duress, like he turns it up another notch. Like, hey, I got my guys. Like he'll yell at them in big situations, like calm the F down. You ran the damn wrong route. Like get your shit together, kind of thing. And that's something that Brock needs to keep with him at all times, because if he doesn't hold that responsibility or that respect from his teammates, I think that's what holds him to a higher standard and why the team appreciates him. And Great Tone 765, brother, I'm glad you're in here because I was hoping you said this so I could bring it up with Jay Harp, and Jay Harp could answer this and we could truly talk about Brock Purdy, even though I was trying to give Brock Purdy praise today. I thought Andy Reid gave out a great quote, talked about how he great timing, great accuracy. I was trying to give Brock some love, but I knew Great Tone doesn't have to say this today. So shout out to Great Tone. So he comes out and he says, Purdy was mediocre in the playoffs and especially in the Super Bowl. And then we ain't going to win with Purdy. And then Emiliano says, damn, Josh got the biggest water bottle I've ever seen.
I told you,
vast oceans in that thing.
I really hydrate. It's not just me talking, man. I really hydrate. Water is everything right now. So stay hydrated.
Going back to this one, so I know Great Tone in the past, he's been in the chat, and if you guys disagree with him, comment in the chat on why you disagree with Great Tone. But Great Tone talked about on a past couple shows ago, he said how Brock Purdy was the reason the Niners, not necessarily the reason the Niners lost. He said he played average in the Super Bowl, and he's obviously saying he's played mediocre in the playoffs, especially in the Super Bowl. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something? Is that something we should talk about a little bit more? Or is it, hey, you know what? It was Brock's first Super Bowl. It was Brock's first opportunity to do something post UCL surgery. How do you approach this kind of comment, or how do you respond to something like this?
Yeah, me personally, I'm gonna give Brock Purdy some grace. One, he's a second-year quarterback. I'm not talking about his draft, where he's drafted. When you're playing, you're playing. All that goes out the door. So one, he's a second-year quarterback, so he's still young. Two, he played decent enough. Not saying he played good, not saying he played great. He played decent enough for the Niners to win the game as a team, knowing that this team is built not for him to go out and win the game, but for them to do it as a unit on offense and defense. So me personally, I'm going to give Brock some grace. So where my beef comes from is when people try to put him up here and compare him to these dudes. And then when he doesn't play as good, then they come back down here to, well, he's still young. Well, he's this and he's that. No, like I'm going to give him grace because of the things I just said. He's a second-year quarterback. He played well enough for what the team around him. He's not paid yet. This team is built for them to not have to lean on Brock's shoulders. Brock just so happened to be a really good quarterback for the Niners this year. So I'm not saying he has no part in it at all, because I mean it's a team game and he does. So, but to say it was his fault or we can't, I think we can win with Purdy. I'm going to go on record. I can't agree with the Great Tone. I respect your opinion, but I can't agree with that, man. I think he can. I definitely think the Niners could win. They were there. They were winning for damn near 4 quarters. They were right there. They should have won. So,
and what's crazy is, for me, the reason why I get where Great Tone's coming from, because I do felt like Brock had an average Super Bowl. People say he played great in the Super Bowl, and like we lost because of defense, we lost because of XYZ, the offensive line, this and this. Like I don't see that, but like where I do have like a disagreement is when fans say Brock is elite. Well, an elite quarterback, in my opinion, is hitting Jawan Jennings on that 4th down with pressure in his face. That's what an elite quarterback is doing. Like, just keeping it real. Like, if we're gonna mention elite with Brock, then let's truly, all right, you want to give me the category we're talking about him in, all right? If it's an elite, then I'm gonna talk about him as if he's an elite quarterback, and an elite quarterback hits that throw. If we're talking about Brock as as how I see him, a really good quarterback in his second year, learning and developing on the fly, then hey, shit, he played good. He played good enough for what the Niners needed him to do. But I just think it's interesting because he says, Great Tone says in the playoffs, in that second half of the NFC Championship game, the Niners don't go to the Super Bowl if he doesn't turn into some quarterback that I've never seen before. If he doesn't turn into some running quarterback, making some beautiful throws, like they relied heavily on Brock, and that's where I got to disagree. Is like, no, I am like considered a Brock hater, I guess, by a lot of people. But it's like I'm also gonna tell the truth. I'm not gonna see him like, you know what? Since I don't like Brock, you're right. Like in that NFC Championship game, Brock was lights out in that second half. I can't say anything else. Brock was lights out. But then hold on, wait, Great Tone. Hold on. You say the Lions coach gifted that game for us. You can't go out and say, you know what, Brock wasn't good. And then we talk about the time where Brock was great or played great, and you're like, well, it was because of this. No, he played great. Like let's give him the credit he deserved for what he did in that NFC Championship game. Like it's constantly moving the goalposts, and that's kind of essentially what you just did. But I respect you, Great Tone, so I'm not going to continue with this one. But Andy Reid gets asked about Kyle Shanahan and getting over the hump to win a Super Bowl. If someone knows about getting over the hump, it's Andy Reid, right? Like he struggled to win his first one and got there, couldn't win one. Well, Andy Reid said, just keep doing what you're doing, and somewhere you pop over the hill. I know he's got a great young quarterback, and him with the great young quarterback is deadly. What does that mean? Keep doing what you're doing, and you and your young quarterback is going to be deadly.
That's Andy Reid just being a nice guy. That's all it is. Andy Reid is being a nice guy. I mean, if you're gonna win, it's now, right? You have all this money that you're dispersing between all these different important positions. You have a good quarterback, a really good young quarterback, but you're not paying him right now. So when you pay him, then you're gonna have to take money from all these other positions, these other important positions that were big pieces in why they're in the Super Bowl. So then then we'll have the conversation that, okay, now let's talk about Purdy. Like
how good is he really?
How good is he really? Like the team is on his shoulders now. We're paying you all this money. We can't pay this person because we're paying you. We can't pay that person because we're paying you. Now go out and win it. Right. So that's when we really have to say, like, okay, can we win with Purdy? I think we can right now, because we have so many pieces around him. Like it doesn't have to just be him. But so for Andy to say that, I mean, Andy got Mahomes. Like, we don't have Mahomes. Andy, so you can't say that, right? So the two don't correlate. We don't have Mahomes.
It's funny because I sent that to my wife, because me and her always we joke around about Kyle Shanahan and stuff like that, and she was like, yeah, Andy Reid wants him to keep doing what he's doing because he's blown 2 Super Bowls to him. Right. She was like, hey, keep doing what you're doing, my guy, because hey, when I play you, I don't want you to know how I'm gonna win. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So for me, I thought it was interesting, like, because keep doing what you're doing. Obviously, what I took from that is, hey, what you're doing is getting you there. Now you have the quarterback that could help win it. Like he kind of like mentioned both. And for me, I thought Andy Reid that comment was just weird. Like, keep doing, obviously what he's doing isn't working, and that's why they're asking you this question. So for me, I thought that was interesting. Emiliano O says, keep doing what you're doing in the third quarter. Andy Reid subtext. So for me, Andy Reid definitely giving praise to Kyle, giving praise to Brock Purdy. For me, it's more so, I thought if Andy Reid wanted to truly be honest, it's, you know what, hey, self-reflect. What did you do wrong? Learn from your mistakes 2 years in a row, or the 2 years in the past 4 years. I learned, explain how he learned. I evaluate every quarterback in the draft, no matter where I'm picking, because as soon as I found the guy, what did I do? I traded up to go get him. Keep evaluating quarterbacks, because even Alex Smith people forget how good Alex Smith was in Kansas City. He was lighting shit up. Like he was to be honest, he was lighting it up.
Yeah.
Didn't stop Andy Reid from going out and getting his quarterback. So like I felt like Andy Reid could have been like, you know what, hey, evaluate every quarterback, look at this, look at that, learn from this. But at the same time, Andy Reid don't have to give anyone what he truly could tell Kyle to his face. Like, it's like this is to the media. So it's like, hey, you know what? He's doing what he's doing. You got a good quarterback now. I don't think you could really read into much of it because it is to the media. Great Tone says, where was the praise from Spags or Reed for Jalen Hurts when he put 35 on that same Chiefs team and defense? Hurts was damn near perfect. Hurts also fumbled, and people forget to talk about this, and I give Hurts hella credit for that Super Bowl. I thought Hurts was phenomenal in the Super Bowl, one of the better quarterbacks I've ever seen play in a Super Bowl. Phenomenal. But people tend to forget that Hurts fumbled away a touchdown, gave the defense 7 points. There was a close game. They barely lost. Fumbled away, gave up 7 points. Nick Bolton scored a touchdown. So like we could go on and on. I thought Jalen Hurts was great, but also I don't think they were asking about Jalen Hurts because Jalen Hurts wasn't drafted with the last pick in the draft, who went to the Super Bowl and led his team and played against Andy Reid. He was a high draft pick in the second round, so it's a little bit different in terms of that. So for me, it's sort of so interesting. Now, the biggest talk of the day was John Lynch speaking on Aiyuk contract and Aiyuk replying with a cryptic message. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up John Lynch's comments about my guy, Brandon Aiyuk. Because Brandon Aiyuk decided to go cryptic on us. He decided to turn into a cryptic and poet on the timeline, if you know how to read emojis. So essentially Lynch was like, you know what, we're negotiating with him. We're trying to, we have a good history of working with the guys we want to get done, of getting something done, and it takes two sides. He mentioned it takes two sides, right? To me, I thought that was interesting. First, I'm like, okay, two sides. He's kind of throwing, hey, Aiyuk, pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Hey, do what you got to do. Pick up the phone. And then he mentions, as I pull it up, he says, takes two sides. He goes, so we can't do that. He goes, we'll see. There's a number of different directions that it could go. Well, we appreciate the heck out of Brandon and who he is as a player. We want him to be part of the Niners. So we're going to work towards making that a reality. And then he was asked about the trade rumors, and he turned those down immediately. He said, that's not happening. I don't know where that's coming from. That's a bunch of lies. Like right away, he was like clear on that. Like he wanted to make sure he was clear that there was nothing going on. They're not talking. They're not trying to trade him. Then he was asked, well, about the 5th-year option, and he pretty much says, well, if we need him to, we would have him play on the 5th-year option. But ask Brandon Aiyuk that question, and he may have a different answer. So for me, what I thought was interesting is he's talking about Aiyuk, but then he's putting pressure on Aiyuk in the sense of he goes about it in a sense of it takes two to tango. And then he mentioned, well, he's on a 5th-year option, so we don't really have to do anything. He could play on that 5th-year option if we wanted. And then he mentioned that we've been currently negotiating with him, so I don't know what I'm supposed. He pretty much says, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Like essentially, like, kind of like, hey, Aiyuk, this is your fault. He said we're actively talking with Brandon, trying to figure something out. I always talk. We have a good history of working with guys. He goes, we want to get it done and get something done. It takes two sides. And then eventually they were asked about the Steelers. I promise you, nothing's going on there, Lynch affirmed. And then he pretty much gave more love to Brandon Aiyuk. But what are your thoughts on this situation? Because mentioning it takes two parties, you right away, you're like, oh, he's throwing him under the bus. As a player, how do you feel if your GM is throwing you under the bus?
Well, yeah, I mean, Aiyuk is rightfully so. He's already in his feelings, and you hear that. And even if John Lynch wasn't meaning to throw him under the bus, when Aiyuk hears it, he's in his feelings already, so he's gonna already be like, "Oh, okay, now he's taking a shot at me." So now boom, like now I really like trade me. I'll tell him to trade me. I don't want to be here no more. It's just making it more like a more dramatic type of situation. And then as far as John Lynch, like having a good rapport with signing players, it took a long time to sign Nick Bosa. It took a long time to sign Debo. Debo came in out of shape. Who else? Like, I don't know.
It took a long time for Kittle. Took a long time for
Kittle.
Warner.
Yeah. So
People
I don't.
people forget, and sorry to cut you off, but people
No, no,
forget
no.
when Kittle was getting his extension, he was the first one to get re-upped because
Mhm.
he had that crazy year.
Mhm.
But Kittle he didn't talk to the Niners. He
Mhm.
had mentioned being traded, and like
Yeah.
this was from his agent. So it's like
Mhm.
this happened with Kittle. Fred Warner's dad was liking tweets on
Yeah.
about Fred Warner during his process. It took him hella long.
Mhm.
It's not something. This is not new for the 49ers.
No, this is so I don't know why John Lynch said that. So it's so I mean, but I'm siding. I'm a side with Aiyuk. Go get your money. Go get your worth. If the Niners don't want to do it, move on. If the Niners, if you really cherish this receiver and you want to keep him on the team, pay him what he wants, pay him what he's worth, not what he wants, pay him what he's worth. Make it work. They can make it work. I don't get. I mean, it's little fine details in contracts that that may go over the average person's head, but you can get the deal done if you really want to. So get it done if they want to. If not, trade them, move on, get something in the draft. But they'll get it done. I don't think he should play on that 5th-year option. I don't think
Absolutely,
he
you
should.
shouldn't. One, it's so after that. So after Lynch, maybe like 20 minutes after Lynch's media day was done, and he stopped talking
Mhm.
about Ayuk. Ayuk tweets out, "Money talks, bullshit walks,"
Mhm.
and he has a valid ass point for saying that. Like, hey, you know what? Nah, you're bullshitting everyone. Tell
Mhm.
them the truth. You
Yeah.
guys haven't talked to me yet. So like it's kind of like, hey, whoa, 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 whoa. Don't be making it look like it's my fault turning the fan base on me
Right.
when I've already turned the fan base on you. He goes like he's kind of like mentioned like, hey, no, don't do that shit. And I thought that was interesting that Brandon Ayuk came out and defended himself. Like,
Mhm.
no, don't do that. Um, One, I did think it was weird for John Lynch to mention the two parties.
Mhm.
He could have easily had not made this a bigger deal if he would have mentioned, you know what, we're negotiating with him. We're gonna get it done. Our plan is to keep Brandon Ayuk on the roster for years to come. That's all you got to say. Like,
That's it.
but instead you're like, no, it takes two teams, two groups to party. He's a great player. You know what? We don't mind him playing on the 5th-year option. Actually, like, oh,
So,
you're just steering the pot.
yeah.
Like you're steering the pot. Like, hey, look, guys, look what we could do. Like the thing is, the Niners and John Lynch, they have leverage
Mhm.
because of the 5th-year option. They
Yeah.
know they could have him play under that 5th-year option, find him if he shows up late to camp. Um, they know after the season they could franchise tag him.
Mhm.
They could franchise tag him again after that, and a year after that. Like they truly have team control.
Yeah.
So for them, they don't really care. As a team, why would I care?
Mm.
Right?
That's
But
tough.
you mentioned as a player, you would not let him play. If you're his agent, you wouldn't pretty much want to let him play. Why is that?
I mean, because one injury that could be a season injury, ending injury, then now he's in a situation where he has to take a 1-year prove it deal. And 1-year prove it deal, if you don't come back the same player, now you miss out on millions of dollars that you could have had, should have had, because by playing on that 5th-year option. Now all the fines and stuff like that, they may add up. So I don't know. I have to look at the whole situation. But I mean, that's just in the back of the player's mind. Like, I don't want to get hurt. Like, I'm not gonna make this block right here because I don't want to get clipped from behind, things like that. So I think it's in everybody's best interest is to pay him or move on. Because him playing on that 5th-year option may not be what how he played last year, trying to get this contract. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's in everybody's best interest to pay him or move on.
Well, even if you look at it, we saw Debo Samuel last year, right? Similar
Mhm.
or 2 years ago, whenever the contract was, but yeah, I think it was last year.
Mhm.
Um, Similar situation where he was in a contract to unfollow the 49ers. He started saying, "Hey, trade me." He had his agent go out publicly, say, we requested a trade. Well, Debo came into camp out of shape because he
Yeah.
didn't want to work out until he had a contract because of the fearing of an injury. Hey, if I get injured, pretty much I'm not going to get that second bag. I'm not going to get that money that I'm looking for. And I think essentially Brandon Aiyuk has a valid point. Is like, hey, you know what? Why am I going to do anything right now? If I tear my knee, the Niners aren't going to care. They're not going to give me. They're not going to extend me. They're going to give me a cheap contract. I'm going to hit the road. Like, but what was interesting was people were trying to turn Aiyuk's comment about the money talks, bullshit walks comment, because Antonio Pierce, and this is a place that has been rumored around Brandon Aiyuk, the Las Vegas Raiders. Their head coach came out and they were talking. They asked him about Josh Jacobs, and he said that exact quote: "Money
Oh,
talks,
that's crazy.
bullshit walks."
That's crazy.
So people were trying to say, "Well, nah, this is Aiyuk saying no." Jesus Christ! I'm back. I have the game. College one was March Madness on, and they let people in for the Iowa game when Caitlin Clark, phenom like Iowa's girl, fans are sprinting as fast as they can because I think it's as long as you have a ticket, you can sit wherever you want.
Oh, that's crazy.
So they're sprinting, and I'm like, damn, little girl's probably like 4 years old. Mom's dragging her.
Right.
Poor little girl's being dragged through the arena. I was like, geez. So Antonio Pierce said that. Brandon Aiyuk tweets that, like, or Instagrams it, quotes like, it's funny how you use all emojis. That's comedy. He was in the sauna and he used all emojis. So people were trying to say, hey, no, this is actually him saying, send me to the Raiders. That's kind of cryptic.
Yeah, that's a lot of deciphering. I mean, I wouldn't put it past, like, I'm pretty sure Antonio Pierce wants to bring Brandon Aiyuk in, but what is that going to cost?
I'm gonna say send Tay Adams back to the Bay.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, if you're gonna be making a trade, it's all right, Tay. Sorry, I know you wanted to play for your Raiders you grew up rooting for, but you're gonna have to come back to the Bay. You can go play with Brock. At least you'll have a veteran quarterback. Your last few years will be a great ending to your career. That's the only way. If you're trading him to a team like that, that's the only way it happens.
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna get something. All right. You want to make it a player for player? Then I need him back, and I'll give you. If you want, I'll give you a third round on top of it because Tay's a lot better than him.
Yeah, we may have to third or fourth rounder. Yeah, we'll have to do that. So,
but it's crazy because I know a lot of people are looking into it. I don't think Aiyuk was going anywhere. Like, it's funny that he tweeted that out, Instagram that out right after George Kittle wants to play with the fan base too, and puts out an Instagram post on. The way I read his was I sent someone. I don't know if you've seen it, but
I did. I didn't take the time. It was too long. What happened? Pause. But yeah.
So I sent a text to my boy. I was like, "This is how I read it." Because it was like heck of emojis, way too many.
Yeah.
But I'm at work. I had hella time today, so I was just hella bored. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna break this down. Don't walk. Your hands will get you out of this world. Get you an out of this world bag because use an alien emoji. How else am I supposed to break that down? And you'll eat, dog. Like, I'm like over here just hella bored at work. I'm like, you know what? Just chilling, bro. Just like,
you know what? That sounds about right.
So I was just chilling. I'm just like, all right, how am I gonna break this down? So essentially, Kittle's saying, "Don't leave, dog. Wait. Your hands are gonna get you that crazy alien bag, out of this world bag, and then you're gonna eat. Like, don't even worry about it. I did the same thing." Do you want a GM and a head coach to be all in your videos? That's funny. What are your thoughts on Antonio Pierce as a head coach?
The players love him. He's definitely a player's coach. Now, I don't know as far as like X's and O's, and and that's why you bring in the staff to run your offense, and to bring in the staff to run your defense. It's I mean, you can do it that way. You don't have to be a Kyle Shanahan to be the head coach and be the offensive guru. So as far as being a coach, he's a player's coach. The players respect him. The players, they played well under him. So I'm curious to see what he does for a full year. And
Same.
to see what type of coach he really is.
And the thing is, it's not always about just being that X's and O's guy. If we look at John Harbaugh, special teams coach turned head coach, doesn't do anything defensively, offensively. Jim Harbaugh, his brother, hires OCs, hires DCs. A lot of these coaches, they hire outside, and they're more so leader of men. And that's how I see Antonio Pierce. He's a leader of men. He brings everyone together. He has that swagger to him. He obviously knows where his roots are from. He knows he's from Compton. He uses that energy to feel these players and like, hey, I'm just like y'all. I'm from the hood. I grew up that way. I played that way. Like, I think it's cool. I like how he coaches. I like his mentality, his upbringing, everything like that. I love how he pulling up. I love how he be pulling up in his Impala.
Oh yeah,
the stadium. Like,
you see that as a player, you're just like, oh, look at Coach, man, look, I got to give me one.
Hey, Coach, where can I give me one of those?
Yeah, exactly.
It's so it's cool to see. It's like a big brother. Like he's treating his players like family. Like he's not. I'm not going to belittle you guys. You want to smoke a cigar? Let's smoke a cigar. Like it's nothing crazy. I think it's pretty cool. But that's it for today's show. Thank you guys all for tuning in. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. Make sure you guys are following J Harp II on Twitter. Make sure you guys go buy yourself a water bottle, a book. Make sure you guys subscribe to Clutching Sports. Y'all have a good rest of your night.